Your teachers told you Charles Lindbergh was a national hero. They never mentioned his friendship with a Nobel Prize winner who wrote the blueprint for Nazi eugenics. They never told you Lindbergh chose his wife partly for her genetics, or that he dreamed of creating an institute to control who could have children. In 1935, a book he publicly praised was later used by the Vichy regime to justify forced sterilization. The pilot who crossed the ocean had ideas about humanity that would make you see him completely differently. Charles Lindbergh entered the world on February 4, 1902, in Detroit. And right from the start, his life seemed shaped by two strong forces around him. His father had crossed the ocean from Sweden and built a career in law and politics, while his mother had chased knowledge with a quiet intensity that set her apart. She earned a chemistry degree at the University of Michigan, and then a master's from Columbia, which was rare for women at that time. Their home carried a mix of scientific thinking, political debate, and restless ambition. When the family moved to Little Falls in 1905, young Charles watched his father's world grow as he stepped into public life, and little by little it shaped the boy's mind. He grew up surrounded by ideas, by books, and by expectations that pushed him toward something bigger, even before he knew what he wanted. Everything shifted in 1909, when his parents separated and the house split in two. He was 7, old enough to feel the weight of the change, but too young to understand why it was happening. From then on, he moved between his mother's home in Detroit and his father's farm in Little Falls. The constant shifting left him unsure where he belonged. He learned early how to pack quickly, how to hide feelings, and how to manage silence. There were moments when the distance between both parents felt wider than the miles he traveled, and all of it settled inside him in a way that made emotional closeness difficult later in life. His father's political responsibilities and his mother's academic focus created a home filled with purpose, but not always warmth. And the lack of emotional comfort pushed him toward independence long before childhood ended. While his personal life was full of movement, his father's public life was even louder. From 1907 to 1917, Charles August Lindbergh stood in Congress and argued loudly against American involvement in World War I. His speeches warned about tangled alliances and foreign conflicts. These ideas surrounded young Charles like a constant drumbeat. They shaped the way he saw the world, and later echoed through his own voice when he argued against entering World War II. Growing up around political debate gave him access to influential people, strong opinions, and complicated ideas, and all of it fed the ambition slowly building inside him. By 1922, that ambition tugged him away from the University of Wisconsin. He had spent 2 years there studying engineering, but the classroom walls felt too tight for him. He wanted air, engines, and sky. So he walked away from college and headed to Lincoln, Nebraska, where he paid $500 for his first flying lesson. It was a huge amount for him, but he handed it over anyway because nothing mattered more. He learned quickly that passion did not erase financial limits. He could not afford the damage bond required to fly solo, so he worked as a mechanic, repairing planes for other pilots and studying every part of the machines he longed to fly. This struggle became the foundation of his approach to aviation, teaching him to solve problems with his hands and his instincts. As he grew more comfortable in the world of planes, he stepped into barnstorming tours that took him across Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana between 1922 and 1923. These shows pulled crowds at fairs and dusty fields, and Lindbergh earned his place by climbing onto wings while the plane roared through the sky. He did parachute jumps, walked across wings, and risked falls that could end a life in seconds. At one show in Omaha in June 1922, he jumped from 1,800 feet for the first time, and after that, the jumps kept coming. He earned between $10 and $25 per stunt, and learned how unforgiving the air could be. Many barnstormers died during these shows. Every day he saw the danger up close and lived with the knowledge that a single wrong move could be his last. These experiences toughened him and taught him the kind of calm that only forms when someone has already faced fear at full height. His work during this period led him to buy his first airplane in May 1923, a war surplus Curtiss JN-4 Jenny that cost $500. The little biplane had a 90-horsepower engine and barely reached 70 miles per hour. But to Lindbergh, it represented freedom. He flew it across the Midwest, used it to support his father's Senate campaign, and pushed himself until he crashed it more than once. Each time he repaired the plane himself, with borrowed tools and stubborn patience. The Jenny became a part of him, and flying it cemented everything he wanted from life. Barnstorming was thrilling but brutal. Lindbergh survived intentional crashes, risky mid-air transfers, and emergencies that forced him to leap from planes with only seconds to spare. One emergency jump sent him spinning toward a barbed wire fence, and he hit it hard. His heavy suit shielded him just enough to walk away. These near misses taught him how quickly planes could fail and how fast a pilot had to think. They also taught him that luck mattered. Many pilots died in the same kinds of stunts he performed, and each survival became another reminder that he was still here for a reason. By October 1923, he felt something pulling him toward a more serious future in aviation. He went to Lambert Field in St. Louis and watched international air races that displayed speed, precision, and advanced machines far beyond the barnstorming world. Seeing those aircraft cut through the air changed him. He understood what flying could be when skill, engineering, and discipline worked together. It pushed him to step away from carnival tricks and toward military training. In March 1924, he entered the U.S. Army Air Service program at Brooks Field in San Antonio, along with 103 other cadets. The training was so deadly that only 32 survived the first year. Crashes happened often, planes failed mid-air, and collisions took lives without warning. Lindbergh focused intensely. His average score was 93.39, the second highest in the group. The pressure was constant, and every day felt like a race against disaster. Yet he endured. The risk seemed to sharpen him instead of break him. That same year, on March 6th, he faced one of the most terrifying moments of his training. During a simulated dogfight, his SE-5 biplane collided with another aircraft. He had seconds to react. He jumped from 3,000 feet, felt the parachute open, and floated down while the wreckage fell away. He returned to flying almost immediately, as if survival meant he had earned another chance to keep learning. By March 14, 1925, he graduated at the top of his class. Only 18 cadets remained from the original 104. He earned his wings and his commission as a second lieutenant. But even then, he did not plan to stay in military service. Civilian aviation called to him with more freedom and more possibilities. As the years moved forward, he kept meeting danger with the same calm he had built during barnstorming. He survived 4 emergency parachute jumps in total, more than any pilot before him. One came on June 2, 1925, during a test of a plane called the Plywood Special, when he bailed out at only 350 feet after losing control. Another came on September 16, 1926, when he flew mail between Peoria and Chicago through thick fog and ran out of fuel. He jumped at night from 4,000 feet, setting a record at the time. His fourth came on November 3, 1926, when a snowstorm over Ottawa forced him out of another failing plane. He landed on a barbed wire fence again, but walked away once more. Charles Lindbergh's story as a male pilot began when he was only 24, and it moved with a pace that never really slowed down. In April 1926, he stepped into a job that people quietly called the most dangerous civilian position in the entire country. It was the St. Louis to Chicago mail route, a stretch of 278 miles that he had to understand so well that every field, every bend, and every shadow in the landscape became part of his memory. He flew 5 days a week through fog, snow, rain, and long nights, with almost no navigation tools to guide him. The danger hung over every takeoff because, in that same year, 31 airmail pilots died trying to deliver mail. That meant one pilot lost for every 2,000 hours of flight. Even with that risk, he worked with a calm mind and helped maintain a 98% on-time record within the first 5 months, although winter pushed him harder than anything else. Ice and fog were the only things that forced him down. The job never offered comfort, but he kept moving because early American aviation needed pilots like him. The danger followed him into the sky in ways he could not escape. On September 16, 1926, he flew at night in a snowstorm that swallowed every bit of light. His fuel dropped to 0, and he had no choice but to jump from 4,000 feet. He landed safely while his plane shattered. It became known as the longest night parachute jump at that time. Only a few weeks passed before the sky tested him again. On November 3rd, he was caught in another blinding storm at 13,000 feet, with no visibility and no fuel. He bailed out again into cold darkness and heavy snow, and reached the ground unharmed near Koval, Illinois. The plane crashed without him. Most pilots would have tried to land, and many would have died. His quick thinking saved him twice, and people began calling him Lucky Lindy. These moments showed how unforgiving early airmail flying really was, and how narrow the line between life and death could be. Long before his mail flights ended, another idea had already taken root. Back in May 1919, Raymond Orteig announced a prize of $25,000 for the first nonstop flight from New York to Paris. By the time Lindbergh thought seriously about it in late 1926, the prize had already claimed the lives or crippled the attempts of 6 well-known aviators. Roosevelt Field, the place where most attempts began, even gained a grim nickname as the Graveyard of Aviation. Still, the prize stirred competition that stretched across the world. Pilots pushed technology, courage, and luck to the limit, because winning meant changing history. When Lindbergh looked at the challenge, he didn't see money, he saw possibility. By February 1927, he needed backing, so he went to St. Louis businessmen like Harry Knight and Harold Bixby. Most pilots believed only multi-crew planes could survive such a long journey, but Lindbergh thought the opposite. He believed a single pilot in a lighter plane would have better odds. He explained how less weight meant more fuel, and more fuel meant more range. Many called his idea reckless, but his confidence won them over, and they invested $15,000. Their support moved everything forward, because almost every other attempt was funded by governments or wealthy individuals. Lindbergh had only his belief, his planning, and the people he convinced. The next step was to build the plane he imagined. In early 1927, he helped design a custom monoplane at Ryan Airlines in San Diego and stripped away anything he considered unnecessary. No radio, no parachute, and almost no navigation equipment. Instead, he filled the plane with 9 fuel tanks that held 450 gallons, enough for a theoretical range of 4,200 miles. The journey to Paris was about 3,600 miles, so that margin became his safety net. The team finished the plane on April 25, 1927. To prove its strength, Lindbergh flew it from San Diego to St. Louis on May 10 and 11. It took 14 hours and 25 minutes without stopping. That 1,500-mile trip erased doubts and pointed him toward New York. On May 20, 1927 at 7:52 in the morning, he prepared to take off from Roosevelt Field. His plane weighed heavily with 450 gallons of fuel, and the runway lay soft and muddy. The forecasts showed storms over the Atlantic, but he knew rivals were waiting, so he took the risk. Witnesses saw the plane struggle to lift. It barely cleared the telephone wires by about 20 feet. For nearly an hour, he could not climb past 100 feet. People on the ground held their breath, thinking he would not make it. Yet slowly, he gained altitude and turned toward Paris. That moment carried the tension of an entire era, because so many pilots before him had failed to rise from that same field. Once he reached the open sky, he had only his compass, his reckoning, and a periscope because the fuel tank blocked his forward view. No radio spoke back to him, no autopilot shared the load. He flew alone for 33 hours and 30 minutes, covering about 3,610 miles. A sealed barograph recorded that the flight never stopped. He landed with 322 liters of fuel still in the tanks. The cold, the isolation, and the sheer length of the journey pushed every human limit he had. Yet he held steady. The real threat, though, came from exhaustion. Lindbergh had not slept for more than a day before even taking off. As the hours passed, he slipped into a strange state. He saw crew members in the cockpit, even though he was alone. He saw islands that did not exist. He drifted in and out of micro-sleep, and sometimes left parts of his logbook blank because his mind drifted beyond control. To stay awake, he flew low over the ocean so the spray would hit his face. He refused to eat because he feared food would make him sleepy. That fight with fatigue nearly broke him more than weather or machines ever did. When he reached Le Bourget outside Paris at 10:22 at night on May 21, 1927, an estimated 150,000 people rushed onto the field. They pressed against the plane and tore off pieces of its fabric as souvenirs. French military police had to rescue him. The reaction spread across the world. In 1 month, he received 3.5 million letters, 14,000 telegrams, and 100,000 poems. Offers worth $5 million arrived in his hands, equal to about $88 million today. The world had never seen anything like it, and his name became the center of a global aviation boom. Awards followed quickly. On March 21, 1928, President Calvin Coolidge gave him the Congressional Medal of Honor through a special act of Congress, the first time it had ever been awarded for a peacetime achievement. He also received the Distinguished Flying Cross and the French Legion of Honor. His success sent aviation stocks climbing and brought new excitement to air travel. It changed the direction of an entire industry. His private life moved just as quickly. He met Anne Morrow and married her on May 27, 1929, in Englewood, New Jersey. She was 23, a Smith College graduate, a poet, and someone with a quiet strength that matched his restless spirit. They became engaged after only 4 dates. Their wedding stayed small and private because he wanted to keep the media at a distance. Her father was Dwight Morrow, the U.S. ambassador to Mexico and a partner at J.P. Morgan, which placed them inside powerful circles. Within months, Anne learned to fly and became his co-pilot, navigator, and radio operator. Their partnership helped open aviation to women and shaped early commercial routes. By 1928 and 1929, Lindbergh was working as a technical advisor for transcontinental air transport and Pan American Airways. He chose aircraft, tested them, planned routes, and even flew the final leg of TAT's first transcontinental route in a Ford Trimotor. People soon called those paths the Lindbergh Line. He also helped Pan Am develop transoceanic routes by selecting planes and surveying long stretches of sky and water. His financial involvement by 1934 had earned him more than $187,000, though he often reinvested much of it back into aviation. He and Anne also made several groundbreaking survey flights. In 1928, they flew through Central and South America. In 1931, they spent 2 months flying to the Orient, leaving Long Island on July 27th and passing through Canada, the Northern Pacific, and Alaska to reach Japan. Their Lockheed Sirius was built for long water landings and had a 2,000-mile fuel range. Anne became the first white woman to set foot in Baker Lake during that journey. In 1933, they surveyed routes from Newfoundland to Europe for Pan Am. Each trip pushed aviation forward and shaped future international routes. Then came the moment that marked the darkest point in their lives. On March 1, 1932, their 20-month-old son, Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., was kidnapped from their home in Hopewell, New Jersey, around 9 at night. A ladder stood by the nursery window. A ransom note demanded $50,000. The case became known as the crime of the century. After 2 months of searching and painful negotiations, the child's body was found on May 12th, only 4.5 miles from the home. The autopsy showed he had died from a skull fracture, possibly when the ladder broke. The loss devastated the Lindberghs and shocked the entire world. 2 years later, on September 19, 1934, police arrested Bruno Richard Hauptmann after tracing gold ransom certificates to him. They found $1,400 of the ransom money in his garage and claimed his handwriting matched the ransom notes. At the trial in January 1935, Lindbergh identified Hauptmann's voice, though many questioned how reliable that memory was because it came from an exchange that happened in darkness from 70 yards away. Hauptmann was convicted and executed on April 3, 1936. He maintained his innocence until his final moment. Later investigations showed serious problems in the evidence, including signs of police fabrication, and raised doubts that he was truly guilty. Charles Lindbergh's ties to Nazi Germany began to grow the moment he moved his family to England in December 1935, because that move put him close enough to accept the invitations that soon followed from top Nazi officials. As 1936 started, he traveled to Germany again and again, and each visit opened more doors than the last. Hermann Göring, Hitler's deputy and the head of the Luftwaffe, welcomed him as if he were a prized guest. Factories and airfields that were off-limits to almost every foreigner suddenly opened wide for him. During that first major visit in 1936, he inspected warplanes like the Junkers 52 bomber and the new Messerschmitt 109 fighter, machines that were shaping the future of warfare. He even flew some of them himself, and every detail he gathered went straight to U.S. military intelligence. That helped Washington understand how fast Germany was rearming. In his private notes, he wrote about Germany's spirit and energy and determination, brushing aside reports about Hitler's aggression and the treatment of Jews. He kept returning in 1937 and 1938, meeting more officials, touring more bases, and speaking openly about how impressed he was by the regime. Then came the moment that changed how the world viewed him. On October 18, 1938, at a dinner held inside the American Embassy in Berlin, Hermann Göring stepped forward with a medal. It was the Service Cross of the German Eagle, the second highest civilian honor Nazi Germany could give. Lindbergh had no idea it was coming, and the room fell silent as it was placed around his neck. Only a few weeks later, on November 9th and 10th, Kristallnacht unfolded across Germany. Synagogues burned, stores were smashed. 91 Jews were killed, and over 267 synagogues were destroyed. Even after that, Lindbergh never returned the medal. He kept it through the invasion of Poland in 1939 and through America's entry into the war in 1941. When people asked why, he said that returning it would be an unnecessary insult to Germany. The refusal stunned the public and made it even harder for him to escape the shadow of the regime he had once praised. Everything escalated on September 11, 1941. On that night, he stepped onto a stage in Des Moines as the most famous voice of the America First Committee. He wanted to warn the country against joining the war, but instead, he delivered a speech that exploded across the nation. He said that 3 groups were pushing America toward war, and as he spoke, he singled out the British government, the Roosevelt administration, and what he called the Jewish race. He insisted Jews held large ownership and influence in media and government. Newspapers blasted him the next morning. President Roosevelt called him a defeatist and an appeaser, and Interior Secretary Harold Ickes called him the #1 Nazi fellow traveler. Even his hometown in Minnesota removed his name from its water tower. Through all of it, he never apologized, not even after Pearl Harbor, and he continued to say that America never should have entered the conflict. Long before his political storm erupted, he had formed a friendship that shaped his beliefs in ways many would only learn later. Beginning in 1930, he grew close to Dr. Alexis Carrel, a Nobel Prize-winning French surgeon working at the Rockefeller Institute. Carrel believed in strict eugenics, spoke openly against democracy, and argued that only people he considered superior should be allowed to govern or even reproduce. Lindbergh admired him deeply, calling him one of the few men he truly respected. They spent years together at Rockefeller, talking about how society could be improved through careful breeding and scientific control. These conversations did not stay in the lab. They seeped into Lindbergh's own worldview and stayed with him for life. Their biggest scientific collaboration began in 1931 when they started working on a device that could keep organs alive outside the body. By 1935, they had created the Carrel-Lindbergh perfusion pump, a system that pushed nutrient-rich fluid through isolated organs for days or even weeks. Scientists recognized it as an important step toward organ transplantation. But behind that achievement was a darker ambition. Lindbergh and Carrel talked about using such technology to preserve and extend the lives of those they considered genetically superior. They imagined a future where only the best genes survived and where the rest faded out. Their pump never made it into widespread medical use, but their ideas stunned those who learned the full story. Those beliefs appeared again in 1935 when Carrel published Man, the Unknown. The book sold widely and laid out a plan for humanity shaped by forced sterilization, euthanasia, and selective breeding. Lindbergh praised the book publicly, wrote reviews, and used his fame to push it further. He believed that democracy and modern medicine allowed weak individuals to survive. Many later pointed out that Carrel's book became a blueprint for Nazi eugenics policies and was even cited by the Vichy regime in France to justify sterilization and euthanasia. Still, Lindbergh never stepped away from the ideas he had supported. The influence of eugenics reached into his private life as well. When he chose Anne Morrow as his wife, he admitted in private letters that he chose her partly for her strong heredity. He often wrote that he wanted a partner who could produce strong, intelligent children. To him, marriage was a way to strengthen the gene pool, not simply something born of romance. Friends found his reasoning cold, but he never changed his thinking. Along with these beliefs, Lindbergh and Carrel planned something they called the Institute of Man, later described as an institute for human betterment. They imagined it as a scientific authority that would guide reproduction. Their vision involved voluntary eugenics at first, but their writings made it clear that they believed only a small elite should be allowed to have children. While the institute never became real, the plans they drafted revealed just how far they were willing to take their ideas. As the decades moved on, Lindbergh's private life grew more complicated than anyone imagined. In 1957, when he was 55, he met Brigitte Heschheimer, a 31-year-old hat maker in Munich. He introduced himself as Caro Kent and never revealed his real identity to her or to their children. Between 1958 and 1962, he fathered 3 children with her: Dirk in 1958, Astrid in 1960, and David in 1962. Their official documents listed their father as unknown, but Lindbergh sent money and affectionate letters under his false name. He kept this life hidden until his death in 1974, but the secret stretched even further. While he was with Brigitte, he also became involved with her younger sister Marietta. With her, he had 2 sons, Vago in 1959 and Christoph in 1961. He even built a home in Switzerland to support them. Like before, he never revealed who he really was. Both sisters believed he was Caro Kent, a quiet businessman who traveled often. Then there was a third woman, Valeska, his private secretary in Germany. Her last name has never been made public. Between 1958 and 1967, he fathered 2 more children with her. Their names remain undisclosed. All these families were kept separate. None of the children knew about the others, and none knew who their father really was. From 1957 to 1974, he balanced 4 households: 5 children with Anne in America, 3 with Brigitte, 2 with Marietta, 2 with Valeska, 12 in total. He wrote coded letters, maintained multiple residences, and used his trips to Europe to move between the families without raising suspicion. Before he died in 1974, he sent final letters to each of his German mistresses, asking them to keep the truth hidden forever. The secret held for nearly 30 years. Then, in 2003, after Brigitte passed away, her children found letters and documents tucked away in her belongings. DNA tests followed and matched them to Lindbergh's American family. That discovery brought everything to light and opened the door to the truth about the other families. The world learned that he had fathered 7 illegitimate children in Germany, hidden behind his false identity for nearly 2 decades. While all of this happened in his private life, his public life after Pearl Harbor took another turn. Rejected by the military for his political activities, he was hired by Henry Ford in 1942 to work at the Willow Run bomber plant in Michigan. Willow Run covered more than 80 acres and cost almost $100 million to build, becoming the largest industrial plant in the world at that time. Lindbergh worked as a research engineer, helping solve problems with the B-24 Liberator. The factory would go on to produce more than 8,600 of those bombers before it closed in 1945. Lindbergh called the plant the Grand Canyon of the industrial world because its scale overwhelmed him. Then, in 1944, he traveled to the Pacific Theater as a consultant for United Aircraft Corporation. Officially, he was a civilian observer, but he flew 50 combat missions with Marine and Army units. On May 29, 1944, he dropped a 500-pound bomb on Kavieng. He also took part in strafing runs and is believed to have shot down a Japanese plane, though his kill was never credited because civilians could not be awarded combat victories. His presence in combat zones surprised many, but pilots respected his skill. During those missions, he developed fuel-saving techniques that extended the range of the P-38 Lightning by as much as 30%. He taught these methods to Marine ace Joe Foss and Army ace Thomas Maguire, and they used his techniques on long-range escort missions. Official records barely mention his contributions, but pilots who served with him remembered how valuable his knowledge was. Almost a decade later, in 1953, he published The Spirit of St. Louis. The book won the Pulitzer Prize and reshaped his image. It told the story of his 1927 flight and early career while leaving out every trace of his political controversies, his eugenics beliefs, and his isolationist speeches. Schools and libraries embraced the book, and for many people it became the version of Lindbergh they knew. But historians pointed out what was missing. They argued that he had rewritten his own life to hide the past he never wanted to face.